genel izleyici kitlesi için uygundur.
Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Dünyayı Ekotürk ekranında buluşturuyoruz. Bu programda her hafta farklı ülkelerden konuklarla farklı perspektiflere yer vermeye çalışıyoruz. Bu hafta kıymetli bir konuğum var. Amerika'dan Miami'ye uzanacağız. Uscinski, komplo teorileri üzerine uzmanlaşmış Amerikalı bir siyaset bilimci Miami Üniversitesi'nden. Uzun yıllardır komplo teorileri ve onları yönlendiren faktörler üzerine araştırmalar yapan bir isim. İnsanların komplo teorilerine neden inandığını, bu teorilerin siyaseti ve toplumu nasıl etkilediğini inceleyen önemli kitapları var. Komplo teorilerinin ne kadar yaygın ve etkili olabildiğine dair örneği son olarak İngiliz kraliyet ailesi üzerinden de görmüştük. Galler Prensesi Kate Middleton kanser olduğunu açıkladığı video üzerinden çok sayıda komplo teorileri üretilmişti ve bunlar oldukça da gündemi meşgul etti. Çok da alıcısı oldu, ülkemizde dahil olmak üzere. Peki komplo teorilerine kimler inanır, neden inanır? Komplo teorilerini üretenlerin ve yayanların motivasyonları ne? Son yıllarda komplo teorilerinde bir artış var mı? Varsa neden? Sosyal medya nasıl etkiliyor? Yapay zeka bu işin neresinde? İşte bu hafta biraz bu konuları konuşalım istedik. Miami Üniversitesi'nden uzman bir isimle Uscinski. Hi Professor Joseph, thank you very much for joining my program.
Hi, how are you? Great to be with you.
Thank you very much. It's great for me as well to be with you. So, Professor, let's start with the definition of a conspiracy theory itself, because there is even a conspiracy theory that the CIA invented the term conspiracy theory itself. So, could you give us a proper definition of the term conspiracy theory first, with some historical perspective? So, let's start with this very briefly, shortly.
So, a conspiracy theory is an idea that alleges a conspiracy. And by that we mean it says that a small group of powerful people are working in secret for their own benefit, and they're doing it in a way that hurts the common good. And this scheme that they're engaged in is going to undermine our bedrock ground rules against the widespread use of force and fraud. Right? So we've got a small group of people who are doing something in secret, and it's generally bad for pretty much everybody except for themselves. And the reason why we call it a conspiracy theory instead of a conspiracy is because we're not sure if the idea is true or not. Right? So in my country, we know that former President Richard Nixon conspired with his henchmen to undermine the Constitution and do a bunch of break-ins and then cover it up and engage in all sorts of illicit deals. So we call that a conspiracy, right? Because we assume it's true.
Yeah.
But with a conspiracy theory, we're not always sure. So we attach the word theory to it to denote we don't know if it's true or not.
Mm-hmm. So now, I was going to also ask you that are there conspiracy theories that are later turned out to be true? I also wonder, because categorically a conspiracy theory should be rejected immediately or it should be considered carefully. How do you, for instance, as an expert, how do you approach a conspiracy theory or a conspiracy when you first hear that?
Well, I never walk around saying that this conspiracy theory or that conspiracy theory is false. I don't think that's the best way to think about them. Usually what I say is that I'm not going to believe it's true until the best available experts have examined it and determined that it's true, right? So I'm not in a position to judge most conspiracy theories. So, for example, if somebody says the CIA killed President Kennedy in 1963, well, I have no way of judging if that's true or not. I mean, that was 60 years ago. I wasn't even born then. I can't judge ballistic evidence or, criminal accounts of what happened. So I'm waiting for the experts who could judge those sorts of things to say this really happened. Now, to get to your early question about the CIA and did they create the word, no, that's just not true. You can find examples of the term conspiracy theory being used in the United States, at least, going back more than 100 years prior to the existence of the CIA. And the CIA just doesn't have the power to make people use words the way that they want them to, or to make words mean specific things. So I'm sure they do all sorts of things, but word games aren't one of them.
I see. So I also want to ask, Professor, is belief in conspiracy theories growing? Of course, it's not something that started with the pandemic, but certainly it has become more popular during and after the pandemic. So I wonder, are conspiracy theories on the rise in the US and elsewhere? Is there a major change in the amount of conspiracy theory belief over time, and if yes, why?
So there isn't good evidence for increases. Now, it's certainly true that we're paying more attention than we ever have in the past. I mean, when I first started studying conspiracy theories 15 years ago, nobody called me for interviews. Nobody cared what I had to say. No one was really interested in the topic at all. And then with Brexit and then Trump and then a bunch of other things that have been going on across the globe, there's been this massive interest, particularly by journalists, but also by scholars in the topic of conspiracy theories. So in a lot of ways, we're paying more attention to it. So that makes it seem like more people are believing than ever before. But there really isn't any data to back that up. I mean, certainly new conspiracy theories pop up all the time, and some amount of people will believe them. But in general, there's just not a across-the-board increase. And normally when people tell me things are so much worse now with conspiracy theories than they've ever been, my retort is, well, is it worse now than when we were burning and killing and crushing witches because they were supposedly conspiring with Satan? Is it worse now than when we were having Red Scares, when we were massively violating people's rights across the country? The answer is usually no. So I think, you know, as much as we have a lot of ideas floating around out there that might be untrue or dubious, I think we ought to give ourselves credit for probably being smarter as a species than we've ever been in the past.
I see. Let's take an example, Professor. A recent example, Kate Middleton cancer video, you know, in the United Kingdom. So the conspiracy was so effective, and surely there is a reason behind that. So why did so many people believe the Kate Middleton conspiracy? I wonder, what was the motivation? What people hope to get out of that, for instance? Can you, through this example, can you give us more insights?
Well, it's hard to know how many people believed anything about Kate Middleton because I haven't seen any polls on it. And I would poll here in the U.S. on the idea, but a lot of people don't know who Kate Middleton is, right? Some people follow the royal family, but not everybody. So it's not entirely clear how much it took off. I mean, to me, what seemed to happen was you had a handful of people who either follow the royal family and engage in a lot of gossip about them, and you have a handful of internet cranks who like to make up stuff. And these people got a lot of attention from mainstream journalists. And a lot of our talking about Kate Middleton conspiracy theories was being done not by conspiracy theorists online, but in mainstream news outlets, right? And this is a familiar pattern. Only 2 months ago, I was getting a lot of calls to talk about Taylor Swift.
Right.
And is Taylor Swift part of some massive conspiracy to help Joe Biden get elected at the Super Bowl?
Right.
And this was a big news story for a few weeks. And then as soon as the Super Bowl was over, it was gone. No one's talking about it anymore. No one really cares. And the one poll of people asking if they believed the Taylor Swift conspiracy theories found that most of the people who had heard of the conspiracy theory were people who were just watching mainstream news, not necessarily people who believed it or were seeking it out, but just people who were getting the coverage. So in a lot of ways, it's not the internet that's spreading these ideas, it's mainstream news that's doing a lot of it.
I see. Professor, how about also related to this, I think technology, deepfake, AI, artificial intelligence, especially in the age of AI, even now video evidence is not reliable anymore, because we have also recently seen it in Kate Middleton's example. There was a video from her, but some people claim that it was a fake video, it was a deepfake video. So the video even is not reliable source, is not a reliable source anymore. So what will be the impact of this in the long run, do you think, with the rise of AI, rise of technology, this deepfake? Should we prepare for more conspiracies out there, or the opposite? Do you think people will eventually fed up with this craziness and they will return to logic, science, or rationality more instead? So how will this affect, how is this affecting, this AI thing affecting the use of conspiracy theories in general?
Well, just like all communication technologies from the past, I mean, they create a lot of panics when they first show up. Like, oh my God, radio is going to lead to the end of civilization, and it's going to make people believe all sorts of wrong things, and it's addictive. And then it was, oh, it's TV is addictive, and it's going to fill our brains with all sorts of wrong things, and it's going to be the end of civilization. And oh, the children. And now we're saying the same thing about the internet for the past few years. Oh my God, it's destroying the children, and everyone's believing all sorts of fake stuff, and we're doing the same thing now with AI technology. Oh my God, it's going to destroy civilization through all sorts of different means. Humans adapt to new technologies, and what is scary today for our kids will be completely commonplace tomorrow, and just something that's part of life and not really a bad thing. I mean, all video is fake to some extent. I mean, you aren't really floating above a blue spinning globe right now. I mean, that's sort of fake video. And my bedroom is never really this clean. Right. You know, that's sort of a fake thing meant to trick your viewers.
Right.
All pictures, even the selfies we take, are designed to give a particular impression that might not really be true.
Right.
And this is the case with all sorts of video and still pictures. And you can go back in time and you could find examples of people either altering still photos or slightly altering video in ways to give a different impression. And none of that required AI, right? So at the end of the day, whether there's video evidence or picture evidence or not, people believe what they want to believe, right? So regardless of what the evidence is.
So it's not going to make a dramatic
video
change.
That I think, yeah, I mean, if people see a video they don't want to believe, they're not going to believe it no matter how real it is, and vice versa.
Right, yeah. I got it. Professor, which countries have the most conspiracy theory believers? Because in Turkey we have a lot of them. I assume that you also have in the US as well. But any statistics on that? And also a follow-up question, what are the common features of these countries? For instance, democracy matters, GDP matters, educated population matters. What are the factors, common features also among these countries?
So a lot of Americans believe that Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy theory, but a lot of people in other countries don't necessarily believe that because they don't know who President Kennedy is, and they don't necessarily care about things that happened 60 years ago in the United States. But when we do poll in other countries, what we find is that when we use very general conspiratorial ideas, is that the United States is sort of in the middle. We're largely on par with countries like the UK and Germany and Italy. And there are countries that have very little conspiracy theorizing as far as we can tell. That seems to be Sweden. But in terms of the places that probably have the most conspiracy theorizing, those are the places where, unfortunately, I can't do any public opinion polling because those are closed societies. And that creates sort of a weird juxtaposition in the sense that in those places, if you don't believe conspiracy theories about the government, then you're probably the dupe, right? Because many of the conspiracy theories are probably true in those contexts. But even if I was able to poll there, it's not like anybody would be wanting to share those views with a foreign pollster.
Right. Also, Professor, what is the relationship between education and conspiracy theory belief? Because especially I remember during the pandemic, even medical doctors, university professors, academics were very skeptical about especially the issue of vaccine. So educating people really works, I mean, in terms of tackling with conspiracy theory or misinformation. What is the relationship between education and conspiracy theories?
So it tends to be the case that people who are more educated tend to believe fewer conspiracy theories. Why that is, I'm not entirely sure. It could be. And I would like to think this as a professor, someone who teaches people for a living, that they take classes, they get smarter, and then they reject ideas that might not be true. On the other hand, it might be the case that institutions of higher education sort of push people out who are outward conspiracy theorists. You know, so if someone was like, hey, I believe all sorts of conspiracy theories about this and that, it might be the case that we're not going to accept that person or let that person into a graduate program or whatnot, because we might be closed to those sorts of ideas. So the relationship is there between education and conspiracy theorizing, but why it comes about, we're not entirely sure.
I see. So how to tackle with this phenomenon, Professor? What would you advise, especially for media, for academics? I mean, to tackle with the or it's okay for you. I mean, shall we tackle with that or not? I'm not sure.
Well, I think the thing is we shouldn't treat every new conspiracy theory as if it's some new thing. I mean, most of what's going on is it's a small number of people who believe almost anything, and they're happy to share it online. But most conspiracy theories aren't believed by most people. And most conspiracy theories, they'll pop up today, and they'll be gone by tomorrow. I mean, most of us aren't talking about the Taylor Swift conspiracy theories anymore. And even a week from now, we won't be talking about Kate Middleton anymore. Yeah. Right? So most of these things are largely harmless, and they largely don't spread very much at all. It's actually a very small number that actually convince anybody.
Unless a politician used that, because we have seen it in the US before Capitol attack, January 6th, because a conspiracy theory eventually led to the attack. So when it's used by a politician, by a leader of a country, what happens?
Well, see, that's what I get most scared of conspiracy theories, because at that point, it's not so much about the conspiracy theory, it's about the person using it to try to generate political action. And in the case that you mentioned, it was to generate violence. Now, after every presidential election, a large portion of the losing side thinks that they were cheated and that the election was rigged. Yeah. I mean, I like to say that conspiracy theories are for losers, because the winners never complain because they get what they want. It's always the losers who complain. Just like in football, it's the losing team that thinks that the referees threw the game to the other side. The winners always think the calls were perfect. Right. And that's the same in politics. So it wasn't a shock that a lot of people thought that the 2020 presidential election had been rigged. But the problem was that the president of the United States at that time got a whole bunch of his supporters together and told them to go in that direction and fight like hell. And then you wound up with an attack on the Capitol. So a lot of what happened had more to do with Trump, you know, getting people to go out and do violence than it was with just a conspiracy theory. That is usually pretty benign.
What is your favorite conspiracy theory, Professor, of all times? Like moon landing, Kennedy assassination, 9/11, climate change, I don't know. What else? What's your favorite one?
So, well, in terms of what I believe, I've been doing this for 15 years. I really don't believe anything anymore, conspiracy theory or not, because I'm now at the point where I see all the different things that people believe, and I'm like, why does anyone believe this? So I'm very careful with what I choose to think is true at this point. But in terms of a favorite, the weirdest one I ever saw was from the 1970s, and it involved a CIA plot to infiltrate the women's movement by creating an army of lesbians. And this wasn't in some weird fringe magazine. It was in the New York Times, and you wound up with some people commenting on it. So you know, people come up with the strangest stuff all the time, and that's just part of being human. There's lots of weird ideas out there. We shouldn't get too upset by it.
Okay, noted. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining my show. Evet, Saat Farkı'nda bu hafta Prof. Uscinski isimli bir profesör ağırladık. Miami Üniversitesi'nden komplo teorileri üzerine uzmanlaşmış bir isim. Biraz bu hafta böyle komplo teorilerini, bunların neden üretildiğini, neden yayıldığını konuşmaya çalıştık. Siyaseten ve toplum üzerindeki etkisini irdelemeye çalıştık. Amerikalı siyaset bilimci Prof. Uscinski ile önümüzdeki hafta yine farklı bir konuyla, farklı bir konukla karşınızda olmak dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.